My beloved child. Before this ordinary moment slips away, let your heart become still for just a little while. There are days that quietly pass without asking anything of you, and then there are moments that seem almost ordinary on the surface yet carry the weight of an unseen turning point. This is one of those moments. Not because fate has trapped you, not because fear is chasing you, but because a story has been unfolding behind the curtain while you were simply trying to make it through another day. If your spirit has felt unusually restless, if your thoughts have wandered back to one particular person without warning, if a memory appeared today that you thought had long since disappeared, do not brush it aside too quickly. Some stories whisper before they finally speak. Some answers arrive long before we recognize the questions they were sent to heal. Perhaps you have wondered why certain emotions return without invitation. Why, in the middle of a busy afternoon, your mind suddenly pauses on someone whose presence still echoes through your heart. It feels almost impossible to explain. Yet tonight's story begins there, not with certainty, but with a quiet pull that refuses to disappear. Somewhere beyond what your eyes can measure, something unexpected has shifted. And the person you love feels it too, even if they cannot yet explain it with words. Imagine the first light of morning spilling gently across an empty road. The world is waking slowly, birds announcing a new day while everything else remains silent. That silence carries more than peace, it carries possibility. In the same way, unseen changes often arrive before visible ones. A seed hidden beneath the soil gives no announcement before breaking open. A river does not ask permission before changing the shape of the land around it. Life often prepares its greatest surprises in places no one thinks to watch. The one you love has been walking through ordinary moments, believing they were just another sequence of familiar days. They smiled when expected. They answered questions. They completed responsibilities. Yet beneath those ordinary actions, something extraordinary happened. A single conversation, a forgotten photograph, a familiar song, or perhaps only a passing glimpse of a place connected to you awakened emotions they had carefully hidden, even from themselves. Suddenly the walls they built over time no longer felt strong enough to contain what had always remained inside. Have you ever noticed how the wind changes just before rain arrives? The trees begin to sway differently. The air feels heavier, though the sky still appears calm. Hearts behave much the same way. Long before words are spoken, emotions begin changing direction. The person you love sensed this change today. They could not ignore it. They tried to continue as though nothing had happened, yet every step seemed to lead them back to the same thought, you. This is not a tale about perfect people making perfect choices. It is a story about imperfect hearts discovering truths they once feared to face. Even the disciples often misunderstood the path before them until the moment clarity finally arrived. The road to Emmaus seemed ordinary until familiar eyes were opened. Sometimes understanding does not appear at the beginning of the journey. It quietly waits until the traveler is finally ready to receive it. What happened today was not loud. No crowd gathered. No dramatic announcement filled the sky. Instead, it unfolded in the quiet places where life often changes forever. Perhaps someone asked them a simple question. Perhaps they watched another couple sharing laughter that reminded them of what they truly desired. Perhaps they heard your name unexpectedly. Whatever the moment was, it reached far deeper than they expected. They realized they had been carrying unfinished words within them, words they could no longer silence. Yet here is the mystery that makes this story impossible to leave unfinished. The message they long to share is not only about what they feel today. It is about something they discovered regarding you, something that reshaped the way they now see the past, the present, and everything they once imagined about the future. And as that realization settled over them like evening light stretching across quiet waters, they understood they could not wait forever. Because what they discovered has already begun changing everything. And you still have no idea what they are preparing to tell you. The moment that realization settled into their heart, everything around them seemed strangely familiar and completely different at the same time. It was as though they had walked through the same doorway 1,000 times, yet only today noticed what had been written above it all along. They stopped. They looked back over conversations they once dismissed, quiet moments they never appreciated, and choices they believed were insignificant. Suddenly, every memory connected itself like pieces of a forgotten mosaic. What once appeared random now carried meaning they could no longer ignore. Yet the greatest surprise was not what they remembered. It was what they finally understood. For so long, they believed life had simply carried both of you in separate directions. They blamed timing, circumstances, responsibilities, distance, even coincidence. But today, something happened that gently dismantled every explanation they had been hiding behind. It was as if a veil had been lifted, revealing that their deepest regret was never losing time, it was failing to recognize your value while they still had the opportunity to express it. Picture a traveler climbing a mountain before sunrise. During the climb, every step feels exhausting because darkness hides the destination. But the instant the first rays of light reach the horizon, the entire landscape changes. The same path suddenly makes sense. The valleys, the rivers, the distant forests, all were there from the beginning. Only the light was missing. That is what happened inside them. The light arrived. And with it came a question they could no longer escape. What if the person I have been searching for has been the one my heart already knows? That single thought echoed through every corner of their soul. It followed them into quiet rooms. It interrupted ordinary conversations. Even while surrounded by people, they felt alone with one overwhelming realization: they had unfinished words that belonged only to you. Perhaps you know what it feels like to carry silent questions into the night. To wonder why certain prayers seem to remain suspended between earth and heaven. Scripture often reminds us that there is a season for planting and a season for harvest. Between those seasons is hidden preparation. Seeds grow where no eyes can see them. Roots strengthen long before branches reach toward the sky. Maybe this season has felt exactly like that for you. Invisible. Uncertain. Filled with quiet waiting. But waiting has never meant abandonment. Sometimes unseen preparation creates the strongest foundations. As the day unfolded, another unexpected moment arrived. Someone mentioned your name. Not dramatically. Not intentionally. Just enough for your absence to suddenly become impossible for them to ignore. The room continued moving as though nothing unusual had happened, yet inside them an entire world stood still. They smiled politely, but their heart was already somewhere else. Every memory returned with astonishing clarity. Your kindness. Your patience. Even the little moments they once overlooked now carried extraordinary weight. It felt almost unbelievable. How could something so familiar suddenly become so precious? They realized that love is rarely lost in a single moment. More often, it becomes hidden beneath noise, pride, fear, or endless distractions. But genuine affection has a remarkable way of finding its voice again when everything else grows quiet. That is exactly where they found themselves. In the silence. And within that silence, they began rehearsing words they never imagined they would need to say. If only I had told them sooner. If only they knew. If only I had not been afraid. Each sentence remained unfinished. Because they no longer wanted to imagine speaking those words. They wanted you to hear them. Before this part ends, let me pause for a moment. If this fictional story is touching your heart and you're enjoying the journey, consider subscribing to the channel and sharing in the comments where you're listening from. Your presence helps these stories reach others who may need a little hope today. But even after making that quiet decision, another obstacle appeared, one they never expected. The message they wanted to send could change everything. Yet there was one hidden truth about the past. A truth they feared might make you question whether you could ever believe them again. And just as they finally reached for the courage to reveal it, something completely unexpected interrupted them. To be continued. Just as their fingers moved toward the message they had been rewriting over and over, an unexpected interruption froze everything. The screen lit up with a notification that had nothing to do with you, yet somehow it stirred emotions they thought they had finally brought under control. They put the phone down, walked toward a window, and watched the evening sky slowly exchange gold for deep shades of blue. The world outside continued as if nothing remarkable had happened, but inside them, a quiet storm had begun. There was no anger. There was no resentment. Only one question echoed through their heart. What if I wait too long again? That question carried more weight than they were prepared to bear. They remembered every opportunity that slipped away because they assumed another chance would always appear. Yet life has a way of reminding us that tomorrow is never guaranteed to resemble today. Some doors remain open longer than expected, while others close without making a sound. A gentle breeze moved through the trees outside, and for a brief moment they remembered an afternoon connected to you. It was not a grand occasion. No celebration. No dramatic confession. Just an ordinary memory that suddenly became extraordinary because they finally understood how much peace your presence had brought into their life. Strange, isn't it? We often recognize the value of light only after walking through long stretches of shadow. Perhaps you have experienced something similar. A familiar place suddenly feels different because someone is missing. A favorite song carries unexpected emotion. A quiet evening somehow becomes filled with memories you never invited. Those moments often reveal what the heart has been protecting all along. The person you love could no longer escape those memories. They stopped trying. Instead, they allowed every forgotten feeling to rise to the surface. With each memory came another realization. They remembered your patience during difficult conversations. They remembered how you noticed details others ignored. They remembered the encouragement you offered even when you were carrying burdens of your own. What once seemed ordinary now appeared incredibly rare. Then another thought arrived. It was both beautiful and unsettling. What if they have already given up on me? That possibility unsettled them more than they expected. Until today, they had assumed there would always be another opportunity, another conversation, another perfect moment. But the heart rarely waits for perfect timing. It responds to sincerity. It longs for truth spoken with humility rather than flawless words spoken too late. The scriptures often describe how a shepherd leaves 99 sheep to search for one that wandered away. It is a picture of persistent love, of not abandoning what truly matters. As this fictional story unfolds, that image quietly echoes in the background, not as a promise about specific events, but as a reminder that genuine love often chooses courage over comfort. Meanwhile, something else was happening that neither of you could see. The circumstances surrounding both of your lives had begun changing in small, almost invisible ways. Conversations were shifting. Plans were being rearranged. Delays that once seemed frustrating were quietly creating space for something neither of you could have planned. Like a river finding a new path around unseen stones, life was moving toward an unexpected destination. Yet they knew one obstacle still remained. The hidden truth. Not a secret meant to deceive. A truth they had buried because they feared it would make them appear weak. They had convinced themselves that silence was strength. That pretending everything was fine would somehow protect both of you. But silence had only built distance. The longer they remained quiet, the heavier those unspoken words became. Late that night, they opened an old notebook. Between forgotten pages was a sentence they had written long ago. One day, I hope they understand what I never found the courage to say. Reading those words felt like looking into a mirror that reflected every missed opportunity. They realized they were no longer afraid of admitting how deeply they cared. They were afraid of discovering they had waited too long. Outside, the stars slowly appeared, one by one, across the dark sky. They offered no loud announcement, yet together they transformed the entire night. Hope often arrives the same way, not all at once, but quietly, until darkness no longer feels so overwhelming. Taking a slow breath, they finally unlocked the phone once more. This time, there would be no deleting. No rewriting. No hiding behind carefully chosen excuses. They began typing the message that had lived in their heart for far too long. But before they could press send, something appeared on the screen that made their heart race. It was your name. And what appeared beneath it changed everything they thought they were about to say. To be continued. Your name appeared on the screen at the exact moment they had gathered enough courage to send the message. For a heartbeat, time itself seemed to hesitate. Their hands became still. Their breathing slowed. It wasn't because they suddenly knew what to say. It was because they realized this moment could never be repeated in exactly the same way again. They stared at your name for several long seconds. No words. No movement. Only the overwhelming feeling that life had quietly brought them to a crossroads they had been avoiding for far too long. Then something unexpected happened. The message they had prepared no longer felt important. Not because their feelings had changed. Because they had grown deeper. Everything they had written suddenly seemed too small to carry everything their heart wanted you to know. They erased sentence after sentence until the screen became completely empty again. Sometimes the truest words are the hardest to write. Have you ever stood beside a river and noticed how the strongest currents move beneath the calm surface? Hearts can be exactly like that. From the outside, everything appears peaceful. Inside, entire worlds are shifting. That was their reality. They finally admitted something they had hidden even from themselves. They had spent so much time wondering whether you still cared that they forgot to ask whether they had shown you how deeply they cared first. The question humbled them. For the first time, they stopped blaming circumstances. They stopped blaming distance. They even stopped blaming time. Instead, they looked honestly at themselves. Growth often begins exactly there. In this fictional story, that quiet moment became more powerful than any dramatic declaration. It echoed the wisdom found throughout Scripture, that humility opens doors pride can never unlock. Hearts begin to heal when truth replaces fear. As midnight settled over the quiet streets, a gentle rain began falling. Tiny drops shimmered beneath the streetlights like scattered stars descending toward the earth. They stood watching through the window, remembering how every season eventually changes, even when it feels endless. Perhaps your own life has felt like a season waiting to change. Perhaps you've carried questions with no immediate answers. Yet gardens are never formed overnight. Roots work patiently in places invisible to everyone else. While they watched the rain, another memory surfaced. It wasn't a conversation. It wasn't even a special occasion. It was simply the way you once looked at them with kindness when they felt they deserved none. That single memory became stronger than every fear they had been carrying. They realized love is remembered most clearly through compassion. Not perfection. Not grand speeches. Simple kindness. That discovery gave them courage they had been searching for all along. Before the story continues, if this journey has been meaningful to you so far, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a comment with a single word that reflects what you're hoping for today. Reading your thoughts helps build a community around stories of hope and encouragement. When they returned their attention to the phone, they finally understood what had truly happened earlier that day. The huge event wasn't merely an unexpected conversation. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't even the memories that had returned. The biggest change had happened inside their own heart. They were no longer trying to protect themselves from disappointment. They were ready to risk honesty. Ready to exchange silence for sincerity. Ready to speak without hiding behind fear. Their fingers gently touched the screen once again. This time they wrote only one sentence. No complicated explanation. No dramatic promises. Just words so honest they almost couldn't believe they were finally saying them. But before that message could reach you, another notification arrived. It wasn't from a stranger. It wasn't from a friend. It was someone connected to both of your lives. And what that person revealed about the past threatened to change the meaning of everything you've heard so far. To be continued. The notification remained on the screen, glowing softly in the darkness. They hesitated before opening it, sensing that whatever waited inside was more than an ordinary message. Some moments carry a quiet weight before a single word is even read, and this was one of them. With a slow breath, they opened it. The sender was someone who had quietly witnessed parts of your story without either of you ever realizing it. They were not trying to interfere. They simply felt that the time had finally come to speak. The first sentence was short. There is something you deserve to know. Those words alone were enough to make their heart race. As they continued reading, forgotten pieces of the past began falling into place. Conversations that once seemed confusing suddenly made sense. Small misunderstandings that had created distance were never as simple as they appeared. Assumptions had quietly replaced honest conversations. Silence had filled the spaces where truth should have lived. It was like standing before an old stained glass window. For years they had only seen scattered fragments of color. But when the morning light finally passed through it, every broken-looking piece became part of one beautiful picture. That was the moment everything changed. They realized you had never been the person they imagined during their moments of fear. You had simply been carrying your own invisible battles. Perhaps there were days when you smiled while hiding disappointment. Perhaps there were nights when unanswered questions became heavier than sleep itself. Perhaps you wondered whether anyone truly understood what your heart had been quietly carrying. The fictional voice of this story gently reminds you that many of life's deepest struggles remain unseen. Even the strongest people often fight silent battles. Elijah once believed he stood completely alone until hope quietly reminded him he was never abandoned. Sometimes what feels like isolation is only a chapter, not the entire story. Meanwhile, the person you love felt something they hadn't experienced in a very long time. Peace. Not because every problem had disappeared. Not because every answer had arrived. But because truth had finally begun replacing assumptions. They whispered to themselves, "I wish I had understood this sooner." Those words were carried into the stillness of the night. Outside, clouds slowly drifted apart, revealing a sky filled with stars that had been hidden only moments before. The stars had not suddenly appeared. They had always been there. The clouds simply moved aside. How often does hope work the same way? It doesn't always arrive by creating something new. Sometimes it simply uncovers what has been waiting all along. The message continued. It revealed one final detail. Something so small that almost anyone else would have overlooked it. Long before today's events unfolded, you had unknowingly left behind a simple act of kindness, one encouraging sentence, one thoughtful gesture, one quiet expression of care. At the time, it seemed insignificant. But that single moment stayed with them. When everything else in life became uncertain. When confidence disappeared. When loneliness surrounded them. That memory returned again and again. They realized it wasn't grand moments that shaped the heart. It was genuine compassion. Suddenly, tears filled their eyes. Not tears of regret alone. Tears of gratitude. Because they understood that real love is not measured by dramatic declarations but by consistent kindness that remains unforgettable long after the moment has passed. With renewed courage, they returned to the unfinished message one final time. There would be no more hesitation. No more hiding. No more waiting for a perfect day that might never come. They pressed their fingers against the screen. This time, they finally pressed send. The message was gone. Traveling toward you. Carrying every honest feeling they had hidden for so long. For the first time in countless days, they closed their eyes with hope instead of fear. But just seconds later, their phone vibrated once again. Your reply had arrived far sooner than anyone expected. They looked at the first few words. And in that instant, they realized the story was far from over. Because what you wrote back revealed a secret your own heart had been protecting all this time. To be continued.